Hey guys, this is Rachel with Cypress Textiles, and today we're going to be making the Quarter Mandala Square from the Gloria crochet along, the Gloria Blanket. And I'm going to be using Shaved Disc Katana in color 404 as the background. And then I'm going to pick two contrast colors, contrast color 1 and 2, and they're 390 and 252. And I'm going to use the lighter color as CC1 and then the darker color as CC2. All right, so we are going to get started. There's going to be a couple places where if you were working in a different yarn and you didn't want to change color, I'm just going to make verbal notes at that point. So I'm going to start out by making a ring. You can do a magic ring or you can chain however many you like, but I'm going to chain 3 and slip stitch in the final chain to make my ring. And then all in the ring, I'm just going to go ahead and start with beginning DC. So I'm just going to go straight into my ring and make a single crochet and then a chain 1, and that's going to be the first double crochet of the round. So now I'm going to make 4 more DC, and that's going to be the end of my row. So here's my 5 DC altogether, including that beginning DC. So I'm going to turn, and when you turn, make sure that you always turn your work this way counterclockwise if you look at it from the top. So if you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, you're going to turn counterclockwise. And then whenever you start your next row, you're going to make sure that you trap this working yarn in the first stitch. So our first stitch is going to be a beginning DC in this first stitch right here. So another single crochet, chain 1. So instead of working it with the this working yarn out here and going straight into the stitch, you know, if you could have it out here and then work straight into that stitch, but then it would go up the side. My tip is to bring the yarn over here, and then whenever you insert your hook in the first stitch, just go under the yarn. That way you trap it and it's on the inside of your work versus going up the outside. So I find it just makes neater edges. So I'm trapping it there to make my single crochet and then chain 1. All right, so now we're going to chain 1 again, and this is for a chain 1 space, and then work a double crochet in the same stitch, the first stitch. So now we have beginning DC, chain 1, double crochet all in the first stitch. Chain 1, skip 1, do 1 double crochet in the middle DC there, and chain 1, skip 1, and working into the final DC, which is our beginning DC. So I'm going to go into the chain and make double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And now we're not going to finish this last DC. We're going to change color. So as instructed in the pattern, we're going to draw the new color through at the last step of this final double crochet. And that is how I prefer to change color. So of course this is just a changing color point, so if you have a different way to change color, you can definitely do that. So just in this pattern I wanted to give good details on how to change color, all because a lot of people say, some patterns just say change color and they don't really tell you how to do it, so you have to kind of know that on your own. So I decided to put all the details in this pattern. So I have my new color drawn through, so you can see the working yarn and then the small tail of it. So now what we're going to do is just drop this working yarn and then pull the working yarn of the main color across it. So I've got it all here. I'm just going to cross it over. That way it's trapped whenever I turn. So get that to focus there. So just cross it over, and then you can take your working yarn from CC1 and just continue. So you can see how it's trapped here. All right, so now we're going to turn counterclockwise again, and this yarn is trapped. This tail is just hanging. We're just going to leave that loose for now, and I'm going to go up under CC1 to go into that first stitch. Alrighty, so whenever you insert your hook underneath CC1 to go into that first double crochet, you're just going to go straight into a beginning DC. So just go straight into a single crochet and then chain 1 for the first DC of the row. And now we're going to chain 1 again, and that's for a chain space. And then double crochet in the same DC as the previous beginning DC. So you've just got beginning DC, chain 1, DC, all in that first stitch right there. Now chain 1, and now you're going to work into this skip stitch from row 1. So you're just going to yarn over twice to make, we're going to make a 3 TR cluster. So yarn over twice, insert your hook into this stitch here, and you're not going to work around this part. So you're just going to kind of bend this back and then insert your hook straight into that skip stitch. Pull up your loop, draw the yarn through 2 loops 2 times, and then yarn over twice again because we're making that cluster. So you leave this last little part unworked right here. Yarn over twice, insert your hook in the same spot, pull up your loop, draw the yarn through 2 loops on the hook twice again, and then we're going to repeat that process one more time. And then I'm just going to draw the yarn through all 3 loops to close the 3 treble cluster, 3 TRCL. There we go. Now chain 1. So now we've got our stitch worked into, and if you just fold that back part back up, now this is what you're looking at here. You're going to work DC, chain 1, DC, all into this next double crochet right here. DC, chain 1, DC. Okay, so now here's what you're looking at. Then you're going to chain 1 and repeat this 3 TR cluster in this next skipped double crochet from round 1. So yarn over twice, and there's the skipped double crochet. Just work straight into it. Bend this part back if you have to just reach that stitch really well. And we're going to make the 3 TR cluster, just like before. All right, draw the yarn through all 4 loops on the hook. And now, here's what you're looking at here. Then we're just going to make our last final part of this row. Just chain 1, fold this back part back up so you can see the stitches again. And you're going to work into the final DC, which is our beginning DC from the previous row. So just work DC, chain 1, DC into that stitch. All right, and we're not changing color on this row, so we're just looking at this right here with the 2 3 TR clusters and then 3 kind of pairs of DC, chain 1, DC. All right, so we're going to turn and work straight into the first stitch with a single crochet. And we're not making a beginning DC this time, we're just going to make a single crochet, and then we're going to do a row of alternating stitches of trebles and singles, and it's going to make bobbles on the right side. So this is the wrong side right here. So the first thing we're going to do is make a treble crochet, and you've already made a single, so your treble is going to be kind of squashed down, and that's what we want. So just yarn over twice, insert your hook into the chain space, and make that treble. And then when you're making it, don't try to make it stand up tall. It's going to curve over to the side like that. See how it curves to the side? And then when you make your next single crochet in the same chain space, when you come around to the front like that, the treble sticks out at the back, you can already see. So just make your next single crochet. So treble crochet, single crochet in all of the chain spaces across. So here's my next chain space. We're only working in chain spaces at this time. So treble, single, treble, single. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of how it looks on the other side so far. So you've got your bobbles made by your treble crochet stitches there. And then we've got 2 more pairs of treble, single before we get to the end. And actually at the very last chain space, you're just going to make a treble in it because you're going to make your final single crochet in the last stitch. So here's your final treble crochet, and then work straight into this beginning DC, your final DC, with a single crochet. And now we're going to change color. So before you make your final pass to make your single crochet, just go ahead and, avoiding that yarn tail there, just grab your main color and pull it up and through the stitch to finish that single crochet with the main color. And make sure that this floating part right here is not too tight or too loose. And now, to complete this color change, you need to bring the CC1 over the main color. All right, and now you're going to start using the main color. So you've trapped the CC1 up there in the main color. All right, so now we're going to turn the row. We're ready to turn. So turn, you've got your CC1 over here. You're not going to use it right now. And you've got your main color ready to go. So making sure to trap this main color as you've been doing when you turn your work, just like that. We're going to work straight into that stitch with a beginning DC, and then another double crochet in the same spot. All right, so we've got the beginning DC and the DC all in the same stitch, and then you're going to chain one, and on this row we're just working into the single crochets with 2 DC. So just make 2 DC in the next single and chain 1. Okay, so now I have all of my row completed, and even the final single crochet, you make 2 DC in it. So this is how we're looking so far. We've got 8 groups of 2 DC, and then your 7 chain spaces in between. All right, and we're going to turn our work, not changing color on this row. And we're going to work straight into the first stitch with a beginning DC. So single crochet, chain 1. And now we're going to work into our chain spaces with a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And just go straight across all the way just like that. In every chain space, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And again, I'm going to pause and finish the row. And here's how we're looking so far. And then all the way up to the last stitch where I made just a double crochet in the final DC here. And before I finish it, I'm going to change color. So I'm just going to reach down and grab that CC1, pull it up through the stitch to finish the double crochet with the CC1. All right. And I'm going to bring the main color over the CC1 color to trap it in there. So here in the first chain space, we're going to make 3 double crochet, and then I'll pause and show you what it looks like when the row is finished. So here you can see I have the 3 double crochet groups all the way across in each chain space. And then I just made 1 DC in the final double crochet stitch here. All right, now I'm ready to turn. No color change. And now in the next row, we're going to work straight into the first stitch with a beginning DC. And then make a full 3 DC, and you're working in the space between this first double crochet and this 3 DC group. So you're going to go into this space with your hook. You're not going to work into any stitches and there's no chain space there. You're just working into that little triangle of space there with 3 double crochet. And that's what you're going to be doing across on this row. Just squeeze 3 DC in between the groups, and it's going to look squished, and that's okay. So into the next one, now that I've got my 3 in there, into the next one I'm going to work my 3 DC. So just go straight in between all the 3 DC groups and just squeeze 3 DC in there. And don't forget, you've got your beginning DC as well. So beginning DC, 3 DC, 3 DC, all the way across. All right, so here's my row so far, and I've got my 3 DC here at the very last little spot. Like I said, it's not a chain space. So you're gonna make your final double crochet in this beginning DC right here, and we're gonna change color at the last step of it. So make sure you work into the beginning DC chain. I missed the chain there. You squeeze your hook in there and get it in there, and then make your final DC. And I'm gonna back out that last step so that I can change color. So just reach down to get your MC, pull it through, and make sure that this float is loosely on the side there, and then bring over your CC1 over the MC so you can trap it. All right, so now what we're going to do is work straight into your first stitch with the beginning DC, and then into your the center DC of this 3 DC group. So you're going to skip 1 and go into the middle DC of that 3 DC group with double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. All right, so now you're going to work skip 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Again, it's the center DC of the next 3 DC group. Now you've got your DC in there, and now you're going to chain 1, and you're going to make a front post double treble crochet. Okay, so yarn over 3 times. So you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's the stitch that you're going to be working your front post double treble on. So we're going to go under and come out of the other side, so you can work your front post DTR in there. Pull up your loop and then draw your yarn through 2 loops on the hook, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. All right, so pull it up so it's about the same height as the rest of the row. It'll be a tiny bit shorter, but it'll be fine. Make your chain 1, and then double crochet in the stitch where your last double crochet is. All right, so I'm going to show you how it looks here. All right, so next we're just going to make skip 2, make double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and in the next middle DC here we're going to do this same thing. So we're going to skip 2, double crochet, the next stitch, chain 1, and then front post DTR in this next double right here. So you have 1 in that one and 1 in that one. So I'll yarn over 3 times, go around this next stitch from the back and come up to the middle, yarn over and draw the yarn through the 2 loops on the hook 4 times. Okay, and then chain 1, double crochet in the same stitch as your last double crochet. All right, so in the next 3DC group, so skip 2, we're going to do the same thing again. DC, chain 1, and front post DTR. This time we're going to work into this stitch right here. So if you count from this side now, you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's in that 6th stitch from the left. All right, so go up under that stitch to make your, oh, I got to yarn over 3 times. Go up under that stitch for your front post DTR, pull up your loop, and draw the yarn through 2 loops on the hook 4 times. And actually, I didn't pay attention when I made my 3 yarn overs, so I'm going to show you this little tip. So if your stitch looks like this, where you have this giant gap on your last pass, it's going to have a big hole at the top, like this. So to try to avoid that, you're going to do what I didn't do, which was yarn over 3 times and put them kind of close to the front, so you don't have a whole lot of yarn in those 3 yarn overs. If you do it like this, you've got a lot more yarn involved, and by the time you get to the last part, you're going to have that big gap. So squish it to the front so there's less yarn used in those 3 yarn overs. And then by the time you go through 2 loops in the hook a couple times, it's going to loosen up, trust me. So just go straight into working your front post again, front post DTR, pull up your loop and draw the yarn through 2 loops on the hook 4 times. And then your gap is smaller and your hole is not nearly as noticeable there. So chain 1 and DC in the same stitch as the last DC. Okay, and then next skip 2, and then the next stitch, DC, chain 1, DC. Okay, so here's what we've got so far. This is, in my opinion, this is like the most complicated row of the whole square. So if you get past this row, then you're going to be fine, smooth sailing for the rest of the square. All right, so skip 2, DC in the next stitch, chain 1, and front post DTR in the next DC on that same row that you've been doing them on. And it's the 5th DC from the left. Okay, chain 1 and DC in the same stitch as the last DC you made. Okay, so here's what we've got. Now we're going to skip 2 and then DC, chain 1, DC. All right, and now the last thing we're going to do is just make a double crochet in the final DC there. And we're just going to turn, and this row is super simple. So in every stitch in space, you're going to make a single crochet. So in the first stitch, start out with single crochet, and then in the next one, then you've got a chain space, single crochet in there. So every stitch in space across. Okay, and your stitch counts are in the written pattern. So you can always check to see if you're doing the right thing by seeing if you have the correct amount of stitches after you're finished with the row. So I'm just working into every chain one space and every stitch with a single crochet. So here's how I'm looking so far. Here's how it looks when I turn back over. All right, so you can see where I'm going with this. I'm just gonna do single crochet all the way across and show you how it looks when I get back. All right, so I've gone all the way across with my single crochets, and I'm on the very last stitch here. I'm gonna change color. So I've got my final DC, my final single crochet in the last DC here, and I'm just gonna reach down, pull up my CC1 through there, and bring main color over, and then turn. All right, so in this first stitch, we're gonna make a beginning 4DC popcorn. So we're gonna go straight into a beginning DC, single crochet, chain one, and then 3 more double crochet in that same stitch. All right, and then once your 4 DC are done, including that beginning DC, you're gonna take the loop off the hook, insert the hook through that beginning DC, grab the loop and pull it through to close your beginning 4DC popcorn. All right, so then chain 2 and skip 2, and then make a 4DC popcorn in the next stitch, and that's gonna be your repeat. Chain 2, skip 2, 4DC popcorn in the next stitch. I'm just gonna show you how to do the 4DC popcorn, and then I'll do the rest of the row and then show you how it looks. So here's the 4 double crochet all in the same stitch, and now we're ready to take the loop off the hook, go into the first DC, front to back, and grab your loop, pull it through the front, and your 4DC popcorn is done. So just chain 2, skip 2, 4DC popcorn all the way across. Here's my row here with all of my 4DC popcorns, and I have my last 4DC popcorn in the final single crochet of the previous row. So now I'm just ready to turn. So I'm going to turn and work beginning DC in the first stitch of that 4DC popcorn. So you're just going to try to aim for the top of that 4DC popcorn and work straight into it with beginning DC. All right, so there we go. And now we're just going to work 3 double crochet in all of the chain spaces across. Okay, and here is how the motif looks so far with that row in place. So if you can see, I have the 3 double crochet in each chain space across and a DC in this last 4DC popcorn here. So actually in this last stitch, we're not going to finish it. We're going to change color to the main color. So pull it through. Okay, so now we're gonna make 2 rows of basically granny stitch. So we're just gonna work into the first stitch with a beginning DC. And then we're going to work into the same, the space between this first double crochet and this 3DC group with 1 double crochet. Yes. So with 1 DC, and then work 1 DC in between this first double crochet and this 3DC group. So working into the space again, there's no chain space, and you're not working into any stitch. And then work your next 3DC group into between the next 3 DC groups. Alrighty, so here's how the motif is looking so far. You can see I've got the 3 DC in between all these 3 DC groups, and then here at the very end I have a DC in between the last 3 DC group and the last double crochet, and then a DC in the final stitch. Okay, so now we're just going to turn, and we're going to work beginning DC in the first stitch, and then 3 double crochet in all of the chain. Oh, there's no chain space, so 3 double crochet in between all of these 3 DC groups, just make your 3 double crochet. All right, just like the previous row, working in between the 3DC groups. Okay, so here's how we're looking so far with that, and I'll show you how it looks in just a moment. All right, so that row is finished, a super simple row there, and I've got my 3DC between all the 3DC groups, and right before the last 2DC, I have a 3DC group here, and then the final DC in the last stitch. So I haven't finished the final DC because I am going to change color. So I have CC2 for my katana pack, all because I'm working with the katana pack. If you're working with the Callista pack also, or just if you like this color change here where you want to change to CC2 right here. But if you're working with a Whirl pack, or if you're working with a Metropolis Cutie Pie pack, then you're going to bring up your CC1 up to change color back to CC1. But for this pack, I'm going to change to CC2. So just draw CC2 through here. And like I said before, all of the details for color changes are in the written pattern if you want to not be so confused about when to change color. So I've changed to CC2 through there. So of course, I'm just going to cross over the main color over here so I can carry it up. And now I'm ready to start my next round right here.